Welcome to the Discourse Analyzer AI Toolkit, where articles come alive. You're listening to the audio version of our article. For the full text and an interactive experience, check out the link in the description below. Interact with any selection using our AI assistant to enhance your understanding. Let's explore.
Gender differences in discourse analysis. Gender differences in discourse analysis focus on how language use varies between different genders and how these variations reflect, reinforce, or challenge societal norms and power dynamics. Discourse analysis explores how gender identities are constructed, negotiated, and performed through language, and how these practices contribute to the maintenance or subversion of gender roles and inequalities. 1. Key concepts of gender differences in discourse analysis. Gendered language. The use of language differently by different genders. Gendered language refers to the differences in speech patterns, vocabulary choices, and communication styles between men and women, often reflecting societal expectations and stereotypes. Lexical choices. Men and women may use different words or expressions to describe the same experiences. Women are often stereotyped as using more emotional or evaluative language, while men might use more direct or assertive language. Conversational styles. Studies have shown that women tend to use more polite forms, hedges, e.g., kind of, maybe, and tag questions, e.g., isn't it, to maintain social harmony, while men might use more interruptions and commands. Example: in a workplace meeting, a woman might say, "I think we could consider exploring this option," while a man might say, "We should go with this option." The woman's statement is more tentative and inclusive, which reflects a stereotypical gendered communication style that is more collaborative, while the man's statement is more assertive and direct. Gender and power dynamics. How language reflects and reinforces power relations between genders. Language is a powerful tool for expressing and maintaining power dynamics between genders. Discourse analysis examines how men and women may use language differently to assert dominance or to accommodate others, and how these patterns reflect broader societal power relations. Interruptions and dominance. Men are often observed to interrupt more frequently in conversations, which can be a way to assert dominance. Women, conversely, might be more likely to backchannel, e.g., saying, right, to show support or encouragement. Silencing and marginalization. Women's voices may be silenced or marginalized in certain discursive contexts, such as in male-dominated fields or settings, reinforcing gender inequalities. Example: in a mixed-gender discussion, if a woman is frequently interrupted by male colleagues when she tries to contribute, this pattern of interaction can reflect and reinforce the broader power dynamics that privilege male voices over female voices. Gender performativity. How gender is constructed and performed through language. The concept of gender performativity, introduced by Judith Butler, suggests that gender is not something one is, but something one does. It is performed through repeated actions, including language use. Discourse analysis examines how individuals perform gender through their speech and how these performances reinforce or challenge gender norms. Speech acts and gender identity. The way individuals use language can affirm or challenge their gender identity. For instance, adopting certain speech patterns or vocabulary can be a way of performing masculinity or femininity. Cultural scripts. Gendered speech often follows cultural scripts, which are socially constructed norms about how different genders should speak and behave. Example: a woman in a leadership role might adopt a more assertive and direct communication style traditionally associated with masculinity to command authority and be taken seriously in a male-dominated environment. This can be seen as a performance of gender that challenges traditional norms of femininity. Gender and politeness strategies. Differences in how men and women use politeness in communication. Politeness strategies often vary between genders, with women traditionally using more politeness strategies to avoid conflict, maintain social harmony, or show deference. These differences can reflect broader societal expectations about gender roles. Positive politeness. Women might use more positive politeness strategies, such as compliments, to build rapport and strengthen social bonds. Negative politeness. Women may also use more negative politeness strategies, such as hedging or apologizing, to avoid imposing on others or to soften requests. Example: a woman might say, "I'm sorry, but could you please pass me the salt?" even in a casual setting, whereas a man might say, "Pass the salt, please." The woman's use of an apology and indirect request reflects a politeness strategy that aligns with traditional expectations of femininity. Gendered discourses. How societal discourses reflect and shape gender roles. Gendered discourses are the ways in which language and societal narratives shape our understanding of gender roles and expectations. These discourses are pervasive in media, education, and everyday conversations, influencing how gender is perceived and performed. Stereotypical representations. Media and cultural narratives often perpetuate stereotypes about how men and women should behave, speak, and interact. These discourses can limit individual expression and reinforce traditional gender roles. Resistance and subversion. Some discourses challenge traditional gender roles, offering alternative ways of understanding and expressing gender identity. Example: the common discourse that boys don't cry reinforces the stereotype that emotional expression is a sign of weakness, particularly in men. This discourse can influence how boys and men manage their emotions, often discouraging vulnerability. On the other hand, feminist and queer discourses may challenge this norm by promoting emotional openness and rejecting rigid gender binaries. Point 2. Examples of gender differences in discourse analysis. Example 1. Gendered communication in the workplace. Negotiating authority and influence. In the workplace, gender differences in communication can affect how authority is negotiated and how individuals influence others. Women might face challenges in asserting authority without being perceived negatively due to gender stereotypes. Indirectness. Women may use more indirect language, such as hedging or questioning intonation, when making suggestions or giving instructions, to avoid being perceived as too aggressive. Assertiveness. Men are often more direct and assertive in their language, which can be perceived positively in leadership roles, while women might be judged more harshly for similar behaviors. Example: a female manager might say, "Maybe we should consider adjusting the deadline," while a male manager might say, "We need to move the deadline." The difference in directness reflects gendered communication styles, which can impact how authority is perceived and exercised. Example 2. Gendered language in advertising. Reinforcing gender stereotypes. Advertising often uses gendered language to appeal to specific audiences, reinforcing traditional gender roles and stereotypes. Targeted language. Products marketed to women often use language that emphasizes beauty, care, and emotion, while products for men may focus on strength, power, and control. Gendered appeals. The language used in ads often reflects and perpetuates gender norms, such as associating women with domesticity and nurturing, and men with adventure and independence. Example: a beauty product ad might use language like, "Reveal your inner goddess," to appeal to women, emphasizing beauty and femininity. In contrast, an ad for a men's deodorant might use phrases like, "Unleash your power," or "Take control," appealing to traditional masculine ideals. Example 3. Gender differences in political discourse. How male and female politicians use language. Gender differences in political discourse can affect how male and female politicians are perceived and how they communicate their messages to the public. Communication styles. Female politicians may use more inclusive language and emphasize cooperation, while male politicians might use more authoritative and decisive language. Media representation. The media often scrutinizes female politicians more for their appearance, tone, and emotional expressions, reflecting gendered expectations. Example: a female politician might say, "We need to work together to find a solution," emphasizing collaboration and inclusivity, whereas a male politician might say, "I will ensure this problem is solved," emphasizing personal authority and decisiveness. These differences reflect broader gender norms in political communication. Example 4. Gendered discourse in education. Teacher-student interactions and gender expectations. In educational settings, gender differences in discourse can shape teacher-student interactions and influence students' academic experiences. Teacher expectations. Teachers may unconsciously communicate different expectations to male and female students, encouraging boys to be assertive and girls to be compliant. Classroom participation. Gender differences in classroom participation, such as boys being more likely to interrupt or dominate discussions, can reflect and reinforce broader societal norms about gender roles. Example: in a classroom, a teacher might praise a female student for being quiet and well-behaved, and a male student for being confident and outspoken. These comments reflect gendered expectations that can influence how students see themselves and their roles in the classroom. Example 5. Gendered language in parenting. Shaping gender roles from a young age. The language parents use with their children can reinforce traditional gender roles and expectations from an early age. Differential treatment. Parents might use different language with sons and daughters, encouraging boys to be adventurous and girls to be caring and nurturing. Language and play. The types of language used during play can reinforce gender norms, such as encouraging boys to engage in physical play and girls in social or nurturing play. Example: a parent might say to their son, "Be brave, you're a strong boy," when he faces a challenge, and say to their daughter, "Be careful, sweetie," reflecting different expectations based on gender. This language reinforces traditional gender roles and influences how children perceive themselves and their abilities. Conclusion: gender differences in discourse analysis reveal how language both reflects and shapes societal expectations about gender roles. By examining how men and women use language differently, how gendered discourses operate in various contexts, and how language reinforces or challenges power dynamics, discourse analysts can uncover the subtle ways in which gender inequalities are perpetuated and contested. Whether in the workplace, media, education, or everyday interactions, understanding these gendered language practices is crucial for addressing and challenging gender biases and promoting more equitable communication. Frequently asked questions. What are gender differences in discourse analysis? Gender differences in discourse analysis explore how language use varies between genders and how these variations reflect, reinforce, or challenge societal norms and power dynamics. This analysis examines how gender identities are constructed, negotiated, and performed through language, contributing to the maintenance or subversion of gender roles and inequalities. What is gendered language, and how does it manifest? Gendered language refers to differences in speech patterns, vocabulary, and communication styles between men and women. For example, women might use more emotional or evaluative language, hedges, e.g., kind of, and tag questions, e.g., isn't it, to maintain social harmony, while men might use more direct language, interruptions, and commands to assert dominance. How does language reflect and reinforce power dynamics between genders? Language can reflect and reinforce power dynamics by the way men and women communicate. For instance, men might interrupt more frequently to assert dominance, while women may use more backchanneling, e.g., to show support. Such patterns can reinforce societal power structures where male voices are often privileged over female voices. What is gender performativity, and how is it analyzed in discourse? Gender performativity, a concept introduced by Judith Butler, suggests that gender is performed through repeated actions, including language use. Discourse analysis examines how individuals perform gender through speech, such as adopting assertive or nurturing communication styles, and how these performances either reinforce or challenge gender norms. How do politeness strategies differ between men and women? Politeness strategies often differ by gender, with women traditionally using more politeness strategies to avoid conflict or maintain social harmony. Women might use positive politeness, e.g., compliments, and negative politeness, e.g., hedging, apologizing, more frequently than men, reflecting broader societal expectations about gender roles. What are gendered discourses, and how do they influence gender roles? Gendered discourses are societal narratives that shape our understanding of gender roles and expectations. These discourses often perpetuate stereotypes, such as associating men with strength and women with nurturing, which can limit individual expression and reinforce traditional gender roles. Some discourses, however, challenge these norms, offering alternative ways of expressing gender identity. How does gendered language manifest in the workplace? In the workplace, gendered language can affect authority and influence. Women may use more indirect language to avoid being perceived as aggressive, while men might use more assertive language. For example, a woman might say, "Maybe we should consider this option," whereas a man might say, "We should go with this option." These differences can impact how authority is perceived and exercised. How does advertising use gendered language to reinforce stereotypes? Advertising often uses gendered language to appeal to specific audiences, reinforcing traditional gender roles. Products for women might emphasize beauty and emotion, while those for men might focus on strength and power. For example, a beauty ad might say, "Reveal your inner goddess," while a men's deodorant ad might say, "Unleash your power." How do male and female politicians use language differently? Male and female politicians often use language differently, reflecting gendered communication styles. Female politicians may use more inclusive language and emphasize cooperation, while male politicians might use more authoritative language. Media also scrutinizes female politicians more for their tone and emotional expressions, reflecting gendered expectations. How does gendered discourse in education affect students? Gendered discourse in education can shape teacher-student interactions and influence academic experiences. Teachers might unconsciously communicate different expectations to male and female students, encouraging assertiveness in boys and compliance in girls. This can affect classroom participation and reinforce societal norms about gender roles. How does language in parenting shape gender roles? Language in parenting can reinforce traditional gender roles from a young age. Parents might use different language with sons and daughters, encouraging boys to be adventurous and girls to be nurturing. For example, a parent might say, "Be brave, you're a strong boy," to a son, and "Be careful, sweetie," to a daughter, reinforcing gendered expectations. How can understanding gender differences in discourse help address gender inequality? Understanding gender differences in discourse helps identify how language perpetuates gender biases and inequalities. By analyzing and challenging these language practices, we can promote more equitable communication, challenge stereotypes, and create environments where all genders can express themselves freely and be equally valued.